Good morning, everybody. It's that time again for our weekly tax update. So today I wanted to talk specifically about the process of actually filing a tax return. So when we complete a tax return, whether it's a business or an individual, a partnership or whatever, right? We then send you emailed instructions, and part of those email instructions are to review your tax return and then sign the e-file authorization. So we don't actually have you sign the tax return, right? So you are signing an e-file authorization. So I wanted to just kind of go over that with you because there's been some confusion about that. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about basically your risks and your benefits for working with a CPA or tax advisor who's filing on your behalf electronically. So let's go ahead and open this up. Oh, I got to share screen first, huh? So let's go ahead and do that. Share screen, share. Okay, so we're looking at what is called Form 8879. This is the IRS e-file signature authorization. Basically, this form, and I send these to everybody in DocuSign, and I have to have this signed before I can e-file for you. So basically, what this does is it says, hey, I'm signing, giving authorization to whoever, in our case, me, to Jason to e-file my tax return on my behalf. And when you sign this, you're basically saying that I've been advised by this person and I'm allowing them to file my return for me. Um, it's not a full power of attorney type form, but it's kind of like a partial or specific power of attorney. Very similar. So basically, it says, "Hey, I'm allowing this person to represent me and file my taxes." Now, I do want to point out, so taxpayer declaration and signature authorization. You are saying that I have examined a copy of the tax return and am now authorizing, and to the best of my knowledge and belief, it is true, correct, and complete. And then you are signing that you're allowing me to file it for you. Now up here, now this is where it kind of looks a little different depending on whether we're filing a business return like a corporation or a partnership versus a 1040. So I wonder if I can actually find, let's do an 8879-C. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this one real fast. This is the one for a corporation. So this looks slightly different, pretty much says the same thing, but so this has total income listed here. And so this is from line 11. So this is kind of confusing to people when you're looking at the 8879 versus the actual tax return. Income is basically your revenue, right? So it's your sales or your revenue, but it's the top line number that you're getting from customers. And so a lot of times people will look at this and be like, why am I paying taxes on that high number? That's not what it is. This is your top line, not your bottom line. This is not what you're paying taxes on. So I just wanted to point that out really fast. That's the difference between the corporate 8879 versus the 1040 8879. So the 1040 8879 talks about your AGI, your adjusted gross income, what your total tax is, and then if you're getting a refund or the amount you owe. This does not include any interest or penalties or anything else. This is just literally the actual tax that you owe. Income tax, not Medicare, not Social Security, just income tax. I guess if you were filing as a Schedule C business, it would probably include self-employment tax, which is your Medicare and Social Security tax. But if you file as a corporation, it's not going to include that. Okay, and so that's kind of what this form is just I just wanted to break that out, that it's on the corporate one, it's revenue or sales, not bottom line taxable income, and then on the individual one, it does kind of tell you what your taxes due are, but it leaves out interest. So it's going to be slightly different, and then you are signing to have me file on your behalf. So what does that mean? when you sign the 8879 to allow me to file on your behalf, what does that mean? You're not actually even signing your tax return, right? You're signing an authorization to allow me to file. So you're not even signing the actual tax return. I sign your tax return for you as your preparer. My name goes on it, and I file it as your tax representative. So what does that mean? Okay, so here, the benefit of that is if there is an error, if you have a paid professional filing your tax returns for you and there is an error, there is some recourse for you in the event that that error is due to negligence. So that is a law term, right? So I have, and anybody who you are getting tax preparation from should have malpractice insurance, professional malpractice insurance. And it's because we could be subject to some negligence. So we have an error in there that results in a penalty. That penalty can't get forgiven, and therefore you owe this penalty to the IRS. Now, they are your taxes, they are your penalties, they are your interest. So the IRS doesn't care about me, they charge you. Now, the benefit of that is if there is an error that results in a penalty, we can use it's built into the tax code pretty much all over the tax code. There is reasonable cause relief, and the number one reasonable cause relief to get penalties forgiven is I relied on a professional tax advisor who got it wrong, and therefore I ended up with this penalty. Please forgive this penalty. And 99% of the time, the penalty will be forgiven for reasonable cause because you did rely on that paid professional. Versus if you self-filed and you had that same error, you can't use reasonable cause saying you personally messed up, but you can use reasonable cause hoping, or basically saying, I relied on this individual who should have known better, therefore, please forgive it. So that's one of the benefits of using a paid preparer. If there's an error, we can use reasonable cause to get penalties forgiven. Now, if penalties are not forgiven and it's gross enough, meaning it's a large enough penalty or what have you, there is some legal recourse there, right? So that's what the malpractice insurance is for. If you can show that it's negligence or whatever, the IRS isn't forgiving it, you actually have some real damages, then you can pursue legal action. So that's another benefit of using an actual paid tax preparer that you have signed to allow to file for you. Now, the flip side of that is you owe taxes, right? Like whether it's calculated correctly or the IRS changes it at some point and then tells you what you owe, you still owe the actual income tax. And it is whatever the IRS says it is. And that's kind of the messed up system that we have in the US, where basically the IRS goes, we know what you owe, but we want you to calculate it first and then pay what you calculated. And if we think you're wrong, we will then tell you you're wrong and change it on you. Versus every other business in the world that says, hey, you used X amount of electricity, here's your bill, so this is what you owe, right? Like, so it's completely backwards system. But what that means is, regardless of what we calculate, that might be the correct answer. And most of the time it is the correct answer. Sometimes the IRS might change it and you still owe your tax. No one else owes it. And even if the IRS changes it, you still owe what the IRS says you owe. Now we have some recourse there. We can fight it. We can, provide new evidence or whatever, and that might get it back to what we calculated. And again, as I said, any penalties or interest associated, as far as the IRS concerned, you owe that. Right now, there is some recourse, as we talked about, but that's what it ultimately comes down to: is the benefit and risks of using, or the benefit, there's really not a lot of risk, benefit of using a paid tax preparer. If there's an error, it might be subject to a penalty because of that error. We can use reasonable cause relief because you relied on that paid preparer, or worst case scenario, you could go for a malpractice case. But now, as a paid preparer, let's talk about my risk. So as the paid preparer, you're signing authorization for me to represent you and e-file your tax return. So what does that mean to me? I actually am carrying quite a bit of risk of that because one, I have to pay for malpractice insurance, right? Like, so if I if I have an error and it comes to negligence, now I'm going to get in trouble for that, right? Like that's what I expect. The other thing is, I can actually get hit with paid preparer penalties if I've done something wrong and I keep repeatedly doing it. The IRS will actually penalize me personally and not you. So I'll get a paid preparer's penalty. And then the third thing is that can happen to me is if as a paid preparer, the IRS finds that I am grossly negligent in a lot of things, they can actually pull my license from me. Or not, they won't be able to pull my CPA license because that comes from a different organization, but they can pull what's called my PTIN, my paid preparer identification number, which means I am no longer allowed to file tax returns for people. So basically, I lose my firm. And so um, when it comes to tax preparation, there is some risk associated with me professionally preparing people's returns. And I'm the one signing that return. So I'm striving to make sure we're not going to have errors or negligence, using the legal term, to when we file your taxes. So that's kind of, I just kind of wanted to throw that out there as kind of an FYI, what are you signing? How can you kind of read it? And what kind of risks or benefits are associated with signing this form and having a paid preparer do it. I hope this was informative. Typically with taxes, this is probably about as clear as mud, but I hope it helps you better understand what it is you're signing and your risks associated with that. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to comment on here and we will respond to you. Thank you. Have a wonderful week.